I believe that unlocking the creative potential of children, teachers, communities across the world is one of the top 3 goals of the 21st century. So the question is, what makes you creative or innovative or a great problem solver? Is it something in your genes or a skill that you've learned? When Einstein was 5 years old and ill in bed, his father brought him a gift. It was a magnetic compass. The young Einstein was fascinated because whichever way he held the compass, it always pointed in the same direction. It was a momentous gift. Einstein remarked years later that it was a compass that made him wonder if there was an invisible force behind everything in the universe. And as we know, he dedicated his life to finding it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Do I have to be Einstein to be creative? So let's fast forward more than a century later, in 2008, 2 village girls on a hot summer's day in rural India, South India, Rani and Roja, sat under a tree to escape the hot sun, a very sensible thing to do in the Indian summer, right? And Rani looked at Roja and asked her a question. She said, "You know, Roja, do you ever wonder, why do you feel cool or cooler sitting in the shade of a tree?" And Roja thought for a second and said, "Well, yeah, maybe it has something to do with the fact that the leaves and branches of the tree are shielding us from the hot rays of the sun." They continued talking until the aha question popped out. Would different leaves have different cooling effects? And that question became the title, The Cooling Effect of Leaves, for a project. And 9 months later, working with igniters from our foundation, the girls won the prestigious Intel Iris Award, competing with the best and brightest kids from all across India at a national level, right? So what do these stories tell you of Einstein and of these 2 rural girls? Well, for a start, they tell you that sometimes abundance makes you poor. Or to use an old Turkish saying, a small key can open big doors. I think what they tell you is the value of curiosity, the spirit of inquiry, the magic of wonder, the power of passion, staying with a problem. You know, Einstein attributed his incredible insights to curiosity, obsession, and dogged endurance. In the late 1980s, I was living in New York. I happened to be visiting what was then called Madras. It's known as Chennai today. And had the honor of meeting the wife of the great Indian mathematical genius, Ramanujan. And Mrs. Ramanujan was living in a very humble, small home in a lower middle-class neighborhood in Madras. So we had a long conversation, and she actually had tears in her eyes when she talked about her husband, almost as if he had died just a few weeks ago and not some 60-odd years earlier. And there was this magnificent bust of Ramanujan's that dominated the home. And she said, "You know, you're the first person to come and see me in 3 years. Everyone's forgotten my husband. No one remembers him." And she had tears in her eyes when she said this. And I didn't know what to say, so I reached out and held her hand, a very frail old hand. She was almost 90 at the time, and said, "Look, for what it's worth, you took care of one of India's greatest geniuses. And that's a privilege that very few people get." And that sort of lit up her face. And she said, "You know, when he died, I went to see him in his hospital room, and all I could see strewn over his bedsheet were pieces of paper with abstruse mathematical formulae." Ramanujan didn't just love numbers, he lived them. He lived them. Passion-based creativity, which is one of the highest forms of creativity. So when I came back to India about 12 years ago from the UK and decided to start a foundation that would spark creativity across India, I asked the question, is it possible to raise the speed limit of creativity in a country? What is creativity? How would we go about doing it? So I got together a number of students like yourselves from schools, colleges, teachers, educators, people from industry, and we came up with a model. We said, hey, look, creative people tend to be great observers. They see a lot more in something simple than the average person does. Why? Well, there's a whole literature on that. Then there's a process of awareness, a gestation, where ideas begin to grow and evolve in unexpected directions with very little bias and prejudice. They have the ability to integrate, assimilate, associate different strands of information to create new ideas. And they have the ability to apply it to produce something of value to society. So we said observation, awareness, association, assimilation, and application are 4 elements we see in creative people. Can these things be learned? The answer was yes. You may not become a Ramanujan or an Einstein, but on a scale of 1 to 10, if you were at 1, you could probably move up to 3 or 4 or 5 or even higher. But all of this, we said, is predicated on curiosity. You have to be interested to find out, to question, to explore. So we said the mission of our foundation should be to trigger curiosity. But to be curious, you have to be motivated to be curious, right? You've got to want to find out. So we said curiosity combined with motivation, which comes from a sense of confidence, a sense of self-belief, that yes, I can do it, and that it's worth doing. So that was our model, and we said, now how do we take it to the masses of India? Rather than build a school for creative leaders, which was my original idea, which was like filling a bucket with water, we said, can we raise the level of the ocean, even by a millimeter? How do we go about doing it? And over the years, I think we came to the conclusion that the answer lies in things like this. It's called the Tippy Top. It costs less than 5 rupees. It's made in a place called Chennapatna near Mysore. And the fascinating thing about the Tippy Top is when you put it on your hand or on the floor or on a table, it rests on its bottom, right? Because that's where the weight is, the center of gravity. But spin it, and I'll demonstrate this for you later during the break, it tips over and starts spinning on its stem. A very counterintuitive thing. It produces what I call the ah effect. You see that and you go, ah, how did that happen? Most unexpected, surprising, counterintuitive. Rather like if you see a beautiful painting, or even if you see something terrible and you go, gosh. But what that reaction does in that moment is that your brain's working, it's come alive, it's awakened. So the ah element is terribly important in education if you want to spark curiosity. The second thing is you want to find out why that happens. So perhaps you go into the internet or talk to a friend or your teacher or read a book, the whole process of exploration to find out why does it happen. And that's the aha experience when you do find out. It could be another question like Rani and Roger, or it could be the solution to a problem. Aha, at the highest level, leads to creative insight. So ah and aha are 2 critical elements in learning. The third element, of course, no prizes for guessing, is you must have fun doing what you're doing, right? And that's the ha-ha moment. Because fun and humor are terribly important in retention, in removing fear and anxiety, and yes, in improving performance. So we came to the conclusion that if you really want to make a difference at any level, you've got to ask yourself, when my teachers go out there and engage with children, do they produce any one of these 3 effects or moments? Ah, aha, and ha-ha. And to keep it simple, I call it the 3 A's. We all know about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, if you want to spark curiosity and nurture creativity on a mass scale, or even in a room like this, I think you've got to create the 3 A's. That becomes fundamental. The way we're doing it is through hands-on experiential learning, because that lends itself easily to such stimulating experiences. It's not the only way to do it, but we find it quite effective in doing it at a mass scale through over 100 mobile science labs and so on. And the kinds of changes we are trying to trigger are the following sorts of shifts, behavioral shifts. The first is to get people from shift from yes to why. There's too much yesing in the system. Knowing the answers to questions, getting good grades, rubbish. because it produces very little creativity. In the US, they found that while the IQ scores have been going up, the creativity scores measured by the Torrance test have actually stayed flat or have been going down. So forget the yesing. If you're going to have exams, ask questions about what sorts of questions can you ask, and give the highest grades to those that ask the best questions, not give the best answers, right? Yes to why. The second is from looking to observing. Most of us just look, we don't observe. C.V. Raman stood on the deck of a ship and asked the question, why is the sea blue? Now, we've been watching the sea for centuries, and he's the first guy to ask that question, ran into his laboratory in Kolkata, and came up with the Raman effect. And there are countless such examples in business, in science, in art, and so on and so forth. Shift from looking to observing, or to paraphrase Einstein, a shift in the mind's eye. The third is from being very passive to learning to explore. Get out, get physical. Find out for yourself. There's a lot of science in nature. Go and observe nature. Go and observe things that are happening outside. Not just outside, but in a more philosophical and spiritual way, even what's happening inside you. Krishnamurti used to talk about life. How do you understand life? Well, the book of life is you. So both the science of the exterior and the science of the interior, understanding that requires the spirit of exploration. The fourth is from being very textbook bound to being more hands-on. C.V. Raman used to say, throw the textbooks out. And today the internet has become the textbook to a large extent, right? So we have to challenge these things. Now, if these four shifts happen, I believe, or we believe, that the most important shift takes place, and that's the shift from fear to confidence. I remember years ago going to a village school near our campus, and I do this all the time, to find out what impact we were having, if any. So I spotted a tall girl who was standing under a tree. Her name was Uma, and I went up to her and said, Uma, you've been visiting our campus so many times. Any impact? And I thought she'd say, yeah, I'm doing great in physics and math and chemistry and so on, which apparently she was doing well. But she didn't say that. You know what she said? She said, sir, I'm not afraid to speak anymore. Now that really hit me here and here. And I realized that, look, one of the unintended positive consequences of all our interventions, hands-on, experiential, the Tippy Tops and other toys and models and experiments that we use, was actually to raise the self-belief and self-esteem of people. Because you play, your brain gets absorbed, you begin to build confidence in yourself. You do projects, and so on. So that transformation in self-belief, confidence becomes key, right? So curiosity is a foundational skill, terribly important. But curiosity alone leads to no action. Curiosity with confidence, the belief that you can do it and that it's worth doing, leads to strong action. So curiosity must be coupled with confidence. But that's not enough. There's a third very important component, and that's humanity. So when you bring curiosity, confidence, and humanity together, you get what I call right action or creative action. And I don't need to give you examples of that in real life. You would have seen it around yourselves. Perhaps you yourselves have shown examples of bringing together these three terribly important qualities. So let me end by saying, learn to live the art of the aha, and ha-ha in your lives. Let it become a living principle, not just in the classroom. Keep your minds open to new stimuli, to new ideas. So live the art of the 3 A's, and you will be able to build a society that is able to express itself spontaneously, express its own inherent genius, to build a society that produces creative action. Thank you.